Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink and get ready for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. So subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet and let's get started. In the first story, Karen is swaying her rights even though she hasn't even been hired yet. In the second story, assistant manager doesn't realize who I am. The first story is, a job applicant lied saying she worked there and ended up not getting the job. Thank goodness. So before I go on with the main story, here are some words from me. This is the first time I've ever written about someone else and shared it because not a lot of people in my life stick out enough to share until my brain found someone. A perfect Karen type. It's nothing crazy, as this was, after all, in the mostly mild-mannered Sweden, and most people just don't give a dump about people like that, especially in this area of work I'm about to explain. A little disclaimer, a lot of circumstances I don't feel comfortable sharing since it's very personal, so I'll simply say this job was meant for people qualified to work around teenagers with difficulties in their lives. This includes drugs, home situations, among other things, that kind of difficulties. I'm not sure what it's correctly called in English, as I'm not a native English speaker. I'm Swedish, so that's good for people to know, I guess. So if I avoid explaining something, it's because it relates to me personally. Please be understanding. This took place 2 to 3 years ago. I'm bad at placing a memory with a certain time, so I don't remember too much about the people's interactions or exact wordings either, so take it with a pinch of salt because it was probably more than I can write down. So, I was around 17 to 18 when Karen applied for this job. Now, I will say, this field of work has a habit of being seen in a negative light, as it's really easy to abuse people in difficult situations and get away with it. I was luckily placed in a very good place that had a reputation of being, well, good, so it was very, very rare, if even possible to me, to find a worker there who acted entitled or superior. I love the people who worked there. Most of them were good at their job and generally just being decent human beings, so you can't imagine my surprise when this very apparent job applicant arrived at the place. Remember that this place is for troubled people, meaning some of these teens have been taking drugs and came from places where they could have attitudes. I think you know where this is going, and I was so freaking glad that they decided for once to direct their attitudes on someone who deserved it. Her first day there wasn't too eventful, but everyone didn't like her immediately, as she had this air of, "Look down on me and you're screwed." But like in a clown kind of air, that is the only way I can describe it. She was literally a joke. At the time, I was very reclusive and probably avoided a lot of what happened, but I sure had to take a piece of this sweet Karen cake when I couldn't avoid her. It was dinner time and Karen had maybe been here for 2 or 3 days. We were eating, everything was fine, until a few of the teens were finished and decided to watch TV. Usually being loud about the show, nothing that totally disturbed anyone else, and it was normal. After only a few minutes after they went to the TV, poor Karen couldn't focus on eating her meal as the kids were being loud. No one really said anything, I don't blame anyone whatsoever, but with every second passing, she became more and more visibly red. Mind you, Karen was middle-aged, like 50 years old or something, definitely on the heavy side and just slightly, if even taller than me. I'm 5'4", or around 166 centimeters, with blonde hair that was very badly kept, as I noticed the tips of her hairs were damaged. Her looks didn't help with how she was perceived, which many did judge her by, me included. Though I didn't exactly say anything or do anything towards her, she thought I was the ideal teen or something. You'll understand soon. Ugh, can you girls keep it down? Me and the others are still eating. No one else complained but her. Of course, they didn't listen. Or they did, they just didn't do what she said, and did, to my amusement, the opposite, now talking louder. The few other workers around exchanged glances, as far as I could tell, but didn't react any more than that. Karen, of course, didn't like it one bit. "If you don't turn down your volume now, I will turn off the TV." This threat was met with louder voices. I just stopped eating to watch the show. Normally, if a worker who actually worked there told them to keep it low, they would probably listen, but all of them knew she wasn't one. Teenagers like this have a very sharp eye for if workers are new or not, and she didn't have any responsibility to do so. She probably knew this as she asked the others to do something or she won't be able to eat in peace. No one did a darn thing, of course, as it was okay. When almost everyone was done except me and the Karen, I was a slow eater then, somewhere in her mind, she decided to say, "Hello? Excuse me, girls, but can you not keep it down while this child and I are eating? Show a little respect for her." It wasn't exactly worded like this, but it felt like so, and even though the girls had quieted down, they immediately raised their volume. She looked like she was about to go insane. Knowing she won't be listened to by them or her peers, she decided to vent about it with me. Now, I had no personal problem with this lady, and am a good listener, especially if I'm curious, which I super duper was, and decided to keep shut, staying by the table until it was uncomfortable to sit anymore. She talked about all sorts of things, of how the young people here don't know respect, and how the workers were lazy and slack, and how she had to fix things up once she is hired. She indicated she's been working in this area of the field before, just not this intensive. There are some other similar works, but not as strict as this one, and couldn't believe how they let the kids behave. People went by now and then, so I was definitely not the only one listening. When I couldn't bear sitting on my aching butt anymore, I decided to excuse myself, saying thanks for the meal before putting away the dish. She muttered something about why the other girls didn't follow my example. I'll be frank here. I'm there for reasons that made me a special case, as in, I don't have most of the attitudes the other girls who came there had. It was an all-girls place, and many who worked here almost thought it was a joke I was there at all, as I was anything but troublesome, though that's not really why people send teenagers here. I was liked by basically everyone, and everyone knew I liked to be left alone, but was friendly when approached. I had more good behavior than most because I was raised strictly and had no energy or the slightest will to waste on people trying to do their job. After a few more days, as Karen was in the other building, there were 5 sections handling different kinds of teenagers, she was back at the building I was at. This time it was something I wasn't much part of, but half experienced being a little further away from the action. Most of the girls here smoked, even though they were underage, something the workers couldn't do anything about as it was one of the problems they were here in the first place, doing illegal things, not all of them of course, and there were strict rules of when and how long they were permitted to smoke. For obvious reasons, Karen goes off at them as they try to let the girls out on the first smoke of the day, which was probably the worst you could do to a teenage smoker, I think. "What are you doing? Why are there cigarettes in their hands?" she almost shouted, but more in a raised voice. No one paid her any mind. Well, not until she snatched one from one of the girls. I would love to say all H broke loose, which in any other circumstances probably would, but everyone knows what would happen if a teen gets aggressive. They would be punished by having their allowance down or not having certain items or even isolated, and I guess she didn't feel for violence. She's known to throw tantrums sometimes, and said to have it back. The workers, confused about her behavior, as any sane person would be who has worked there and knew the rules, told her they're allowed to smoke. She puffed up like a pufferfish, all red, and began spouting, "You are breaking the law, and I can sue this company. I work here, and I know how things work, young lady." The person she talked to, I think was young, but had worked here longer than she stepped foot on the property. The girl said that Karen was definitely not working here, pointing at a paper that was up to show the smoking times. Of course, being the obvious person in the right, Karen didn't listen to it because she was right anyway. "That doesn't matter because it's illegal. I'll talk about this with our boss, and so many of you incompetent people will get fired once they know what you're doing here. You're risking the lives of young children and letting them do these things? You're supposed to be a good example." I kid you not when I say everyone else's faces screamed they wanted to witch slap her across her face twice. The girls had enough and finally began speaking about her behavior. I was surprised they didn't do it earlier and said how she didn't know how to work or even be decent, lying and overall acting like a baby witch. I guess this took her by surprise as she stepped back. The cigarettes were in the hands of the girl again, and all of them were smoking with eyes that could murder, staring at the woman. Probably the only thing keeping them sane was smoking, or I swear they'd be on that woman in no time. She turned around, presumably trying to find support for her belief, and noticed me sitting on the living room couch, trying my best, acting as if I didn't know anything was going on, and tried reading my book. The girls that lived here knew me well enough and would protect me if something did happen. OP, you don't smoke, right? To which I look up, act surprised, and shake my head no. She took this as some sign of approval to drag me into her mess. If you girls knew how to act like her, you wouldn't even be here. OP's the only one who is nice and quiet, not breaking any rules, while you wildies go around doing such rude things thinking it's okay. And you workers, just what makes you think it's okay to let these children smoke? Just because you failed in life, you're not going to put it on them. I will make sure to put this whole place down and let these poor children go to a better place. Oh my god. Though she said other things, these were the ones I remember, and I just still can't believe it. Though I can understand where she's coming from, how didn't she understand when being here for a few days, clearly seeing all buildings let the teens smoke, that it wasn't illegal? Safe to say, her peers most likely told the employer about this, and she wasn't seen the next day, or ever. People like this are something a good place shouldn't and doesn't tolerate. It is toxic behavior in every way, as it didn't function the way Karen thought it did. And, putting toxic kids by toxic adults isn't something you want to do ever. One of the reasons they come to a place like this is to be around at least someone with more than half a brain. Unfortunately, as I said before, it's very common that stuff like this happens easily in these types of work, and I can only hope ever since I left it kept going strong, as I had great memories with the people who worked there. Hope you had a good laugh and wondering how stupid someone can be applying for a job clearly stating they're working with troubled teens and somehow expect them to act obedient when she arrives. An absolute Karen check on her, in my opinion. Huh. So, for them it's legal to smoke, but for others, like outside of wherever that is, it's illegal if you're underage. Why is that, and how is that even a thing? If anyone knows in the comments, please let me know, because I'm actually curious about this. The second story is, let me introduce myself. I worked for 8 years servicing communications equipment on site. 5 of those years were as the department manager. When oil was found in our area, we got so busy we could barely even think. Most of my team were pulling 12+ hour days, 6 days a week, and we were struggling to hire people quick enough. One day, the CEO texted and said he hired an assistant manager for me, which was something I desperately needed. I was dirty as H from my previous job and swung by the store to pick him up and take him to one of our sites where he would be doing paperwork. The moment he got in the truck, he immediately started talking S. He started telling me about how everything we were doing is effed up and the department manager, my name, was a total moron and he would have my job within a few months. I just sat there and mostly listened. He obviously didn't know S about my industry, and every time he would say something wrong, I would try to politely correct him, and he'd either backtrack or insist that I was trained wrong. When we got to the site, out in the middle of the West Texas desert, he complained about the layer of dust on everything and ordered me to clean up the entire site. When I sat down at my desk, the guy continued to bee my ear off about everything that was wrong and chastised me for sitting down at my desk when he told me to clean up the site. So, I called for a taxi, filled out a notice of termination, and handed it to him. He looked absolutely shocked. Then he defiantly protested that only CEO could fire him. I said, "And my name, right?" He sheepishly nodded. So I stuck my hand out for a handshake and introduced myself. I can teach anyone how to service equipment, but I don't have a clue how to teach someone to not be an a-hole. Oh yeah, buddy, I'm sure you're gonna get his job within a few months. In all seriousness, though, OP didn't have to call the guy a taxi. It was actually really nice of him. He could have just left him stranded. Guys, thank you for all the support and likes, and be sure to subscribe to the channel.